My name is Emma Carter. I'm 33 years old. If someone had told me 5 years ago that the same people who ignored me would one day wait for my phone calls, I would have smiled and said they were dreaming. Life has a strange way of teaching lessons. Sometimes it teaches them to us. Sometimes it teaches them to everyone around us. For years, I believed success meant proving people wrong. I thought that one day my family would finally look at me with respect if I worked hard enough, if I earned enough money, if I sacrificed enough. I spent so much time chasing their approval that I almost forgot who I was. But everything changed the day I stopped chasing. That was the beginning of a different kind of success. After everything that happened between us, my family slowly changed their behavior. The loud criticism disappeared. The sarcastic comments became shorter. Even family dinners felt different. They smiled more carefully now. They spoke more politely. But I had learned something important. Kind words do not erase old wounds overnight. So I created healthy boundaries. I answered their calls, but I no longer dropped everything to solve their problems. I visited them, but I no longer stayed where I felt unwanted. I forgave them, but I also protected my peace. For the first time in my life, I realized those two things could exist together. While all this was happening, I continued building my small company. Most people thought success arrived in one big moment. It didn't. It arrived through hundreds of ordinary mornings, long hours, small decisions, quiet sacrifices. Little by little, our business grew beyond anything I imagined. Then something unexpected happened. A well-known millionaire entrepreneur contacted me after seeing one of our projects. At first, I thought someone was joking. I even read the email 3 times before believing it. The meeting was simple, no fancy speeches, no dramatic promises. He looked at my work and said, "I don't just invest in businesses, I invest in people with character." Those words stayed with me. Soon, partnership opportunities followed. New doors opened that I had never even considered knocking on before. But the biggest change wasn't financial, it was personal. Instead of focusing only on earning more, I started helping young artists who reminded me of my younger self. Many of them lacked confidence because someone had convinced them they weren't good enough. I understood that feeling, so I gave them opportunities I never had. Watching them smile became more rewarding than signing contracts. Then one afternoon, my sister Jessica asked if we could meet. She sat quietly across from me, looking at the coffee in her hands. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Emma, I was wrong. I should have treated you better. I'm sorry." There were no excuses, no blaming, just honesty. I nodded. Some apologies arrive late, but they still matter. As I walked home that evening, I understood something I had spent years trying to learn. Success is not revenge. Success is peace. And sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. If you've ever been underestimated, this story is for you. Jessica's apology stayed in my mind for days. I wasn't thinking about the words she used. I was thinking about the silence before she spoke. For years, she always had an answer for everything. She defended herself before anyone asked a question. But that afternoon was different. She simply admitted she had been wrong. When I got home, I sat by my window with a cup of tea. The city was quiet, and so was my heart. A few years earlier, I would have called a friend and celebrated. I would have told everyone that my sister finally apologized. Instead, I kept the moment to myself. Not every victory needs an audience. The next few weeks brought more small changes. My mother started calling just to ask how I was doing instead of asking for favors. My brother even congratulated me after reading an article about my company. His message was short. "I'm proud of what you've built." I smiled. Then I put my phone away and returned to work. I wasn't being cold. I simply understood that my happiness could not depend on someone else's approval anymore. My company continued to grow quietly. We hired more talented people, expanded our projects, and earned the trust of new clients. Every success reminded me that steady work often speaks louder than loud promises. The businessman who had first approached me called again one morning. He invited me to lunch. During the meeting, he placed several documents on the table and said, "Emma, this is only the beginning. I believe we can build something that helps many people." I looked through the papers carefully. The partnership would open opportunities I had never imagined. But the part that touched me most was another idea he shared. He wanted to create a program for young artists who lacked money and connections. Immediately, I remembered my younger self, the girl who worked late into the night while wondering if anyone would ever believe in her dreams. I agreed without hesitation. Soon, every month, we welcomed young artists into our studio. Some came carrying old sketchbooks. Others brought handmade designs folded inside worn envelopes. Many apologized before showing their work. "I'm probably not good enough," they would say. Every time I heard those words, I answered the same way. You don't need permission to believe in yourself. Watching their confidence grow became one of the happiest parts of my life. One afternoon, after a workshop ended, a young woman thanked me with tears in her eyes. She said, "You believed in me before I believed in myself." As she walked away, I realized something important. Money can change your lifestyle. Success can change your reputation, but kindness can change someone else's future. That evening, Jessica sent me another message. It contained only one sentence. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." I looked at the screen for a long moment before replying. Some relationships heal slowly. Some scars never disappear completely. But peace does not require a perfect past. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. And if you've ever been underestimated, this story is for you. A few months passed, and my life settled into a quiet rhythm. Every morning, I arrived at my office before everyone else. I unlocked the door, made myself a cup of coffee, and spent a few minutes looking around the studio we had built together. It still amazed me. There was a time when I worked alone at a tiny desk in a small apartment. I worried about every bill and counted every dollar before buying groceries. Now the room was filled with creative people chasing their dreams. Sometimes I wondered if that younger version of me would even recognize this life. But one thing had not changed. I still believed that success should make you kinder, not louder. One afternoon, my assistant came into my office with a surprised expression. "Emma," she said, "someone is waiting downstairs. He says he doesn't have an appointment, but he hopes you'll see him." I went downstairs expecting a client. Instead, I saw my brother. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked uncomfortable, almost nervous. That was unusual for him. Growing up, he always seemed confident. He always had the right words. This time, he simply said, "Can we talk?" We walked to a nearby park and sat on an empty bench. He looked at the trees before finally speaking. I spent years believing life would always work out for me, he said quietly. I never understood how hard you worked. I listened without interrupting. Then he continued. When people praised me, I accepted it. When they ignored you, I stayed silent. Looking back, I realized silence can hurt someone just as much as cruel words. His honesty surprised me. I wasn't expecting an apology. I wasn't expecting anything. I simply replied, "We can't change yesterday." He nodded. "I know, but we can choose tomorrow." He smiled for the first time that afternoon. As we stood to leave, he asked if I would ever trust him again. I thought carefully before answering. "Trust isn't built by promises," I said. "It's built by actions repeated over time." He didn't argue. He simply said, "Then I'll start there." When I returned to the office, I found a group of young artists waiting for our weekly mentorship session. One young woman looked nervous as she held a folder against her chest. "I almost didn't come," she admitted. "Why?" I asked. She lowered her eyes. "My family says people like me never succeed." Her words felt painfully familiar. I smiled gently and handed her a chair. "Then today," I said, "let's stop letting other people decide what's possible." The room became quiet. Everyone started sharing their ideas, their fears, and their dreams. As I listened, I realized that my journey had never been only about me. Every difficult moment had given me the ability to understand someone else's struggle. That evening, I stood outside the studio as the sun disappeared behind the buildings. I felt grateful, not because everything in my life was perfect, but because I no longer needed perfection to feel happy. Real success isn't making people regret underestimating you. Real success is waking up with peace in your heart and purpose in your work. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. And if you've ever been underestimated, this story is for you. The older I became, the more I understood that healing is quiet. People often imagine that forgiveness happens in one conversation. They think one apology can erase years of hurt. Real life doesn't work that way. Healing happens little by little. One kind word, one respectful action, one peaceful day at a time. That became my new way of living. My family still invited me to birthdays and holidays. The difference was that I no longer felt responsible for everyone's happiness. I attended because I wanted to, not because I was afraid of disappointing them. For years, I had carried that burden. Now I finally put it down. One Sunday afternoon, my mother called. "Emma," she said softly, "we're having dinner tonight. We'd love for you to come." Years ago, I would have canceled my own plans immediately. Instead, I looked at my calendar. "I can stay for 2 hours," I replied. There was a short silence. Then she simply said, "That would make me happy." When I arrived, something felt different. No one compared me to anyone else. No one joked about my choices. Even Jessica greeted me with a warm hug. We sat together around the table, sharing ordinary conversations about work, neighbors, and childhood memories. It wasn't a perfect family, but for the first time, it felt like everyone was trying. As I drove home, I realized boundaries had changed more than my own life. They had changed the way people treated me. The following week, exciting news arrived at my office. The investor who had partnered with our company wanted to expand our projects into several new cities. During our meeting, he smiled and pushed another folder toward me. "I've worked with many successful people," he said. "Some have talent, some have ambition, very few have integrity." I looked at him, unsure what to say. He continued, "That's why I trust you." Those words meant more than the business proposal itself. Money comes and goes. Trust takes years to earn. As our company grew, I made one promise to myself. I would never forget where I came from. Every month, we selected young artists who needed encouragement more than criticism. Some arrived wearing worn shoes and carrying dreams much bigger than their confidence. One young man showed me a notebook filled with beautiful designs. Then he quietly said, "My father told me I'll never make a living doing this." I smiled because I knew that pain. I closed the notebook and handed it back to him. "Don't let someone else's fear become your future." His eyes filled with hope. Moments like that reminded me why success mattered. Not because of awards, not because of money, but because it gave me the chance to lift someone else. A few days later, Jessica visited my office without calling first. She looked around at the busy team, the artwork on the walls, and the young people laughing together. Then she turned to me. "I used to think success meant being better than someone else," she admitted. "Now I see you built all this by helping people." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "I'm proud of you, Emma." I thanked her with a small smile. Years earlier, those words would have meant everything to me. Now they were simply a gift, not a necessity, because I had already learned the lesson life was trying to teach me. Success is not making people regret how they treated you. Success is finding peace even if they never do. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. And if you've ever been underestimated, this story is for you. There was a time when I believed life moved in big moments. I thought everything would change with one victory, one apology, or one opportunity. But I was wrong. Life changes through small choices that we make every single day. Every morning before going to the office, I spent a few quiet minutes walking through a nearby park. I left my phone in my bag and simply listened to the birds and the wind moving through the trees. Years ago, my mind was always busy. I worried about proving myself. I worried about making everyone proud. Now I only asked myself one question. Am I becoming the person I want to be? That question changed everything. At work, our company continued to grow beyond my expectations. We signed new partnerships and expanded into projects that once seemed impossible. The businessman who first believed in me became more than an investor. He became a mentor. One afternoon, after a long meeting, he looked at me and smiled. "You know why this company succeeds, Emma?" I started listing ideas. "Our team?" He shook his head. "Our planning?" He smiled again. "No." I looked confused. He leaned back in his chair. "It succeeds because people trust you." For a second, I didn't know what to say. Trust. It was something I had spent years searching for inside my own family. Now strangers were giving it to me freely because of my actions. That realization stayed with me all day. As our organization expanded, we also increased our support for young artists. We offered free workshops, mentorship, and small grants for creative projects. One Saturday, a teenage girl entered the studio carrying a portfolio that looked old and worn. She apologized before opening it. "I'm sorry if my drawings aren't good enough." I remembered saying almost the same words years ago. I sat beside her and looked through every page carefully. Some sketches were unfinished, some had mistakes, but every page showed courage. I smiled and told her, "Talent grows where encouragement lives." She looked surprised. "No one has ever said that to me." By the end of the workshop, she was laughing with the other students. Watching that simple change reminded me that sometimes one kind sentence can stay with a person for years. Meanwhile, my family continued, trying to rebuild our relationship. The conversations became easier. The awkward silence slowly disappeared. But I also kept the boundaries I had worked so hard to create. I no longer said yes when I wanted to say no. I no longer carried problems that belonged to other people. And surprisingly, the more I respected myself, the more others respected me too. One evening, Jessica invited me to dinner. Halfway through the meal, she looked at me and quietly said, "I used to think you wanted to compete with us." I looked at her. She continued, "But now I understand you were only trying to be accepted." Her words filled the silence between us. I didn't argue. I didn't remind her of the past. I simply smiled. Because healing isn't about winning an argument. It's about no longer needing one. As I drove home under the city lights, I realized the greatest reward of my journey wasn't the company, the partnerships, or the success people could see. It was the peace inside me that nobody could take away. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. And if you've ever been underestimated, this story is for you. People often ask me what the best day of my life was. They expect me to mention the day my company became successful. Some think it was the day I signed my biggest partnership. Others believe it must have been the day my family finally apologized. But the truth is different. The best day of my life was the day I stopped carrying anger. I didn't wake up feeling different. Nothing dramatic happened. The sun rose like every other morning, and the city moved at its usual pace. But inside me, something had changed. I no longer measured my worth by the opinions of people who once doubted me. That freedom was worth more than any amount of money. As our company continued expanding, my schedule became busier than ever. New projects arrived almost every week, and our team worked with people from different cities and backgrounds. Still, I made one rule for myself. No matter how busy life became, I would always make time for people who needed encouragement. Every Friday afternoon, I met with a group of young artists. Some wanted to become designers. Some dreamed of opening their own studios. Some simply needed someone to tell them they were capable. During one session, a quiet young man stayed behind after everyone else had left. He stood near the door and looked nervous. Finally, he asked, "Can I tell you something?" I smiled. "Of course." He took a deep breath. "My family says I should give up. They think my dream is unrealistic." For a moment, I saw my younger self standing in front of me. I remembered the lonely nights, the silent tears, the feeling that nobody believed in me. I looked at him and said softly, "Sometimes the people who love you are also afraid for you. Their fear is real, but it doesn't have to become your future." He nodded, though his eyes were full of emotion. Then I added, "Work hard. Stay humble. Let your actions speak louder than your arguments." He thanked me and walked away with a smile. Watching him leave reminded me why this journey mattered. Later that week, the businessman who had become my mentor invited me to visit a new office building we planned to develop together. As we stood looking over the city skyline, he asked, "Emma, do you know why I trusted you from the beginning?" I smiled. "I've wondered about that." He looked out the window before answering. "Because when everyone talks about success, they usually talk about themselves. You always talk about how to help others." His words stayed with me, long after the meeting ended. That evening, my phone rang. It was Jessica. She didn't need anything. She wasn't asking for help. She simply called to ask how my day had been. We talked for almost an hour, laughing about childhood memories that once felt painful but now seemed distant. When the call ended, I realized our relationship had changed naturally, not because we erased the past, but because we chose not to live inside it anymore. On my way home, I passed the small apartment where I had started my business years ago. I parked for a few minutes and looked at the building. I whispered a quiet thank you to the younger version of myself who refused to give up, even when nobody seemed to notice her effort. She never imagined where the road would lead, and maybe that was the greatest lesson of all. Success is not revenge, it is peace. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. And if you've ever been underestimated, this story is for you. The funny thing about peace is that it arrives quietly. It doesn't knock on your door. It doesn't announce itself with applause or celebration. One day, you simply realize that you slept well, smiled more, and spent less time thinking about people who once hurt you. That was where I found myself. For years, my biggest dream had been to prove my family wrong. I imagined the day they would finally admit that they had underestimated me. But when that day slowly arrived, it didn't feel the way I expected. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like relief. One Monday morning, our company held its monthly meeting. The conference room was full of people discussing new ideas, future projects, and opportunities. As I looked around the table, I noticed something that made me pause. Many of the team leaders were people who had once joined us with no confidence at all. Some had been rejected by other companies. Some had almost given up on their dreams. Now they were leading departments and mentoring others. I smiled to myself. Success grows best when it is shared. After the meeting, my mentor, the businessman who had believed in me from the beginning, asked me to stay behind. He handed me a folder. Inside were plans for another partnership. It was larger than anything we had done before. He looked at me and said, "Emma, I know you can build successful projects, but I also know you build successful people. That's much harder." I sat quietly for a moment. Years ago, compliments made me uncomfortable because I always felt I had more to prove. Now I simply said, "Thank you." Sometimes accepting kindness is its own form of healing. That weekend, we organized a creative workshop for young artists. The room was full of nervous faces. One young woman stood in the corner, holding her drawings close to her chest. I walked over and introduced myself. She smiled politely but looked anxious. "What are you afraid of?" I asked. She laughed softly. "I'm afraid everyone else is better than me." I remembered saying almost the exact same words when I was younger, so I told her something I wish someone had told me years ago. You don't have to be better than everyone else today. You only have to be better than the person you were yesterday. She looked at me with surprise. Then she slowly opened her portfolio. By the end of the afternoon, she was sharing her ideas confidently with the rest of the group. Watching that transformation reminded me why I continued this work. Helping someone believe in themselves is a gift that cannot be measured. Later that evening, Jessica invited me over for dinner. After we finished eating, she quietly brought out an old family photo album. We laughed at childhood pictures and funny hairstyles. Then she stopped at one photo of us as little girls. She looked at it for a long time. "I spent so many years competing with you," she said softly. I looked at the picture too. "We were never supposed to compete," I replied. "We were supposed to grow together." She nodded and tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." I reached across the table and held her hand. The past could not be rewritten, but the future was still unwritten. As I drove home under the quiet night sky, I realized something that no award, business deal, or public recognition could ever teach me. Real success is not making people regret how they treated you. Real success is becoming someone who no longer needs their regret to feel complete. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. And if you've ever been underestimated, this story is for you. Looking back now, I realize that the greatest changes in life rarely happen in crowded rooms. They happen when no one is watching. They happen in quiet mornings when you choose hope instead of fear. They happen in ordinary moments when you decide to keep moving forward. That became my new definition of success. Our company had grown into something much bigger than I ever imagined. We had talented employees, loyal clients, and projects that reached communities I had never even visited before. People often congratulated me for building a successful business, but they only saw the final result. They never saw the nights when I questioned myself. They never saw the mornings when I sat alone, wondering if I should give up. Success hides those moments, but the person living through them never forgets. One afternoon, my mentor invited me to speak at a gathering for young entrepreneurs and artists. The room was full of excited faces. Some were taking notes before I even began. Others looked nervous, just as I once had. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the stage without a prepared speech. I simply told the truth. "I didn't succeed because life became easy," I said. "I succeeded because I stopped allowing difficult people to decide my future." The room became completely silent. Then I continued. "There will always be someone who doubts you. Don't spend your life trying to change their opinion. Spend it becoming the person you were meant to be." When I finished, the applause lasted longer than I expected. But the most meaningful moment came afterward. A young woman approached me, holding a notebook. She smiled and said, "I almost quit yesterday. After hearing your story, I'm going to try one more time." I felt tears forming in my eyes. No business award could compare to hearing those words. Helping someone keep their dream alive was a success no money could buy. Meanwhile, my relationship with my family continued to heal slowly. There were still awkward moments. There were still memories that hurt, but there was also effort. And effort matters. Jessica started visiting my office from time to time. She never interrupted my work. Sometimes she simply sat quietly while I finished a meeting. One day she looked around at the young artists filling the studio and asked, "Do you ever wish you could go back and change everything?" I thought carefully before answering. For years I would have said yes. Now my answer was different. "No," I replied softly. If my story had been easier, I might never have understood other people's pain. She nodded without saying another word. As she left, she hugged me tightly. It was the kind of hug that needed no explanation. That evening, I stayed at the office after everyone else had gone home. The lights were dim, and the walls were covered with artwork created by students we had helped over the years. I walked slowly through the room, reading the small thank you notes they had left behind. Each one reminded me that success is not measured by how many people admire you. It is measured by how many people feel stronger because you believed in them. I locked the office door and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city looked the same as always, but I was no longer the woman who spent years asking for acceptance. I had found something far greater. I had found peace, and peace asks for nothing except honesty with yourself. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. And if you've ever been underestimated, this story is for you. There is something I never understood when I was younger. I thought success would change the way I looked at the world. Instead, it changed the way I looked at myself. For years, I waited for someone to tell me that I was enough. I waited for praise from my family. I waited for approval from people who rarely noticed my efforts. I waited so long that I almost forgot I could choose my own value. Now, every morning when I looked in the mirror, I no longer asked whether other people believed in me. I asked a different question. Did I stay true to myself today? That answer mattered more than anything else. Around that time, our company celebrated another anniversary. The team wanted to organize a large event with speeches, music, and media coverage. I thanked them for their enthusiasm, but I suggested something different. Instead of spending the money on decorations and advertisements, I wanted to create scholarships for young artists who could not afford proper training. The room became quiet. Then everyone smiled. Within days, the plan became reality. Applications arrived from everywhere. Some students lived in small towns. Some worked night shifts while studying. Some had almost given up because they believed nobody would ever give them a chance. Reading their stories reminded me of my own journey. One letter stayed with me more than the others. It came from a young woman named Lily. She wrote, "I don't need someone to guarantee my success. I only need one person to believe I deserve a chance." I folded the letter carefully. Years ago, I could have written those same words. Without hesitation, we accepted her into the program. Months later, she returned with a portfolio that amazed everyone. She stood before the group and said, "Someone believed in me before I believed in myself." The room filled with applause. I looked away for a moment because my eyes had become watery. Sometimes the greatest reward is seeing another person discover confidence. Meanwhile, my family continued changing in quiet ways. My mother began calling simply to ask if I had eaten dinner. My brother started recommending our company to friends without expecting anything in return. Jessica visited often, bringing homemade desserts she knew I loved as a child. None of these moments erased the past, but they showed me that people can grow when they are willing to face their mistakes. One evening, we sat together on my apartment balcony, watching the sunset. Jessica broke the silence. "Do you ever feel angry when you remember everything that happened?" I thought for a long moment. Then I answered honestly, "I remember the pain." She looked down. "But I don't want to live there anymore." The wind moved gently through the trees below us. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was peaceful. As she prepared to leave, Jessica hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for giving our family another chance." After she left, I stood alone under the fading light and smiled. Life had taught me many lessons. Hard work matters, kindness matters, forgiveness matters. But perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: you don't become successful when everyone finally believes in you. You become successful when you believe in yourself, even while they don't. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. And if you've ever been underestimated, this story is for you. As I sit here today, telling you my story, I realize that life gave me something far greater than the success I once dreamed about. It gave me perspective. When I was younger, I believed happiness would come after people finally accepted me. I believed respect had to be earned through endless sacrifice. I believed that if I worked hard enough, loved enough, and gave enough, everyone would eventually see my worth. But life had a different lesson waiting for me. The truth is that some people may never understand your value, and that's okay, because your value does not disappear simply because someone fails to recognize it. Our company continued to grow, but the numbers stopped being the most important part of my journey. Instead, I measured success differently. I measured it by the confidence of the young artists who walked through our doors. I measured it by the smiles of employees who felt respected. I measured it by the peaceful nights when I could close my eyes without carrying anger into tomorrow. One afternoon, we held a small exhibition featuring the work of students from our mentorship program. The room was filled with paintings, designs, sculptures, and photographs. Families stood proudly beside their children. Friends took pictures together. The atmosphere was full of quiet joy. As I walked through the gallery, a young artist stopped me. She handed me a letter. "I wanted you to have this," she said. After the event ended, I sat alone and opened it. It read, "Dear Emma, you probably don't remember our first meeting. I was afraid, uncertain, and ready to quit. You didn't promise me success. You simply told me to keep going. Today, my artwork is displayed on this wall because someone believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Thank you for changing my future." I folded the letter slowly. For a long time, I simply sat there in silence. Years ago, I thought success meant standing above others. Now I understood that true success means lifting others while you climb. Later that evening, my family joined me for dinner. The conversation was simple. We laughed about old memories. We talked about everyday life. No one compared anyone. No one competed. Jessica looked across the table and smiled. "You seem happier than I've ever seen you." I smiled back. "I am," she asked. "Is it because of the business?" I shook my head. "No." "Is it because everyone finally appreciates you?" Again, I shook my head. Then I answered with complete honesty. "I'm happy because I stopped waiting for other people to decide how valuable I am." The table became quiet. I think everyone understood. As I drove home that night, the city lights reflected across the road ahead of me. For the first time in many years, I felt completely free. Not because my past had disappeared, not because life had become perfect, but because peace had replaced the need to prove myself. If my journey has taught me anything, it is this: sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. Success is not revenge. Success is peace. And if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever felt invisible, or if you've ever questioned your own worth, then this story is for you. Keep going. One day, you won't need anyone else's approval to know exactly who you are. If you had met me years ago, you probably would have seen a woman who was always trying to make everyone happy. I apologized even when I had done nothing wrong. I worked harder than everyone else because I thought love had to be earned. I stayed silent because I was afraid that speaking up would push people away. Looking back now, I realize something painful. The person I ignored the most was myself. For years, I protected everyone else's feelings while quietly hurting my own. But healing has a strange way of changing you. Not into a colder person, into a wiser one. These days, my mornings begin differently. I wake up early, make a cup of coffee, and sit on my balcony before the city becomes busy. The silence no longer feels lonely. It feels comforting. Sometimes I think about the little girl I used to be. She wanted someone to tell her she mattered. If I could meet her today, I would sit beside her and say, "You don't have to spend your life proving your worth. It has always been there." That thought always makes me smile. Meanwhile, our company continued to grow in ways I never imagined. The partnership opportunities expanded into new projects, but we never forgot our original purpose. Every success allowed us to help more young artists. One afternoon, we organized a mentorship event where former students returned to share their own stories. As I listened, I realized many of them were no longer students. They had become teachers. One young designer stood on stage and said, "When I met Emma, I thought my dream was impossible. She didn't solve my problems for me. She simply reminded me that I was stronger than I believed." The audience applauded. I sat quietly in the back of the room. For a moment, tears filled my eyes. Not because people were praising me, but because kindness had continued its journey through someone else. That evening, Jessica called. Her voice sounded nervous. "Emma, can I come over?" "Of course," I answered. She arrived carrying a small box. Inside were old family photographs and childhood drawings. She handed one to me. It was a picture we had made together when we were little girls. On the back, in messy handwriting, were the words, "Best sisters forever." Jessica looked down and whispered, "I don't know when we lost this version of ourselves." I looked at the picture for a long time, then I replied, "Maybe we didn't lose it. Maybe we just forgot where to find it." She started crying. This time, there were no long speeches, no excuses, no blame. Just two sisters sitting quietly, allowing honesty to do what pride never could. Before leaving, she hugged me and said, "Thank you for giving me another chance." I hugged her back. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It simply refuses to let the past control the future. As I closed the door, I realized my greatest achievement wasn't the company I had built or the partnerships I had earned. It was the life I had created without bitterness. The world often tells us that success means being admired. Life taught me something different. Success means waking up with peace in your heart, kindness in your actions, and confidence that doesn't depend on applause. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. And if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever felt unseen, or if you've ever questioned your own worth, then this story is for you. Never let someone else's opinion become the limit of your future. As I reach the end of my story, I find myself thinking less about everything I lost and more about everything I found. For a long time, I believed my greatest battle was against the people who underestimated me. I was wrong. My greatest battle was against the voice inside me that whispered I wasn't enough. That voice followed me through childhood. It followed me through family gatherings where I felt invisible. It followed me through lonely nights, difficult decisions. and moments when giving up seemed easier than trying again. But little by little, another voice became stronger. It quietly reminded me, keep going, and I did. Today, when I walk into my company, I don't see an office. I see hundreds of small moments that built this life. The first client who trusted me, the first employee who believed in my vision, the first student who smiled because someone finally encouraged them. None of those moments made headlines, but together they changed everything. A few weeks ago, we celebrated another successful year. The team wanted me to stand on stage and give a speech. I walked to the microphone and looked around the room. Some faces had been with me from the beginning. Others had joined only recently. Yet everyone shared the same hope for the future. I smiled and said, "When people ask me the secret of success, they expect a business strategy." The audience laughed softly. "But success is not a secret," I continued. "It is choosing kindness when bitterness feels easier. It is choosing patience when progress is slow. And it is believing in yourself before the world does." The room became silent. Then everyone stood and applauded. As I stepped down from the stage, my mentor walked over and shook my hand. "You've built a successful company," he said. Then he paused. "But more importantly, you've built successful people." I thanked him, knowing those words would stay with me forever. Later that evening, my family gathered for dinner. There was no tension, no competition, no need to prove anything. Jessica smiled at me across the table and said, "You know, when we were younger, I thought success meant being the one everyone noticed." I looked at her and smiled. "And now?" She laughed softly. "Now I think success is becoming the kind of person who helps others shine." I couldn't have said it better myself. As the night ended, I walked outside and looked up at the stars. The road behind me had been difficult. It had been filled with disappointment, loneliness, and heartbreak. But it had also led me to wisdom, forgiveness, and peace. If there is one message I hope you carry with you after hearing my story, it is this: don't waste your life chasing the approval of people who refuse to see your worth. Spend that time becoming the person you are meant to be. Because success is not revenge. Success is waking up with peace in your heart. Success is setting healthy boundaries without losing your kindness. Success is helping someone else believe in themselves because you remember what it felt like when no one believed in you. And perhaps the greatest lesson life has taught me is this: sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. If you've ever been underestimated, ignored, or made to feel invisible, this story is for you. Keep believing in yourself. Your future does not belong to the people who doubted you. It belongs to the person you choose to become.